TalkSport journalist Michael Benson tweeted this quote from Fox Sports executive Bill Wagner. He said, "What we're going to try to do with PBC, we are going to have a PBC belt and a PBC champion. Let's say of the heavyweight division, Ruiz beats Joshua again, and eventually you have Joshua and Wilder fighting for the PBC heavyweight title." Well, this is nothing new, because when PBC launched, this is exactly what people were saying several years ago, that PBC looked at the UFC model and wanted to have something like that in boxing. If you cast your minds back to when PBC first launched, you'll remember that it was very UFC-like, where they didn't have fighters come into the ring with their entourages. A lot of the time, they wouldn't allow the fighters to carry the belts into the ring or even have the belts in the ring after the fight. So they were trying to move in that direction then. Since that time, they've had to rethink their strategy a little bit. Perhaps it wasn't the right moment to try and go all in with this UFC style boxing. But now that they've streamlined their business, now that they've got this relationship with Fox Sports, again, according to Fox Sports executive Bill Wagner, they're going to try and do it again. Have the PBC belt and do away with all the sanctioning bodies. I did a video recently where I spoke about the fact that a lot of boxing fans are saying that boxing would be better off if it was like UFC. But in that video, I explained that UFC is a little bit of an optical illusion, because a lot of casual MMA fans, and I count myself as a casual MMA fan, a lot of casual MMA fans kind of are under the illusion that UFC is the only game in town. Some people don't even refer to MMA as MMA, they call it UFC. So they've put themselves in a position, the UFC, where a lot of people around the world don't realize that there are actually other MMA promotional outfits that put on their own shows and have their own championships and all that kind of stuff. A lot of casual MMA fans don't realize this, you see, and that's the success that UFC have had, of making themselves look like the only game in town when they're actually not. And I pointed out the fact that you don't have unifications, do you, between the UFC champion and the Bellator champion? Correct me if I'm wrong here, people, but you don't. And there are many other promotional entities out there in the world of MMA. You don't have too many unifications, cross-promotional unifications between the different promotional outfits. Doesn't happen. So how is that any different to what's going on in boxing? In fact, it's probably worse. It's just that the UFC have put themselves in a position where people think that they are the ultimate when it comes to MMA. That if you're the best UFC, if you're the best UFC fighter in your division, that means you're the best MMA fighter in that weight class right the way across the board. But that isn't necessarily true. So as that relates to boxing, if Al Haymon tries to go in that same direction, which of course he's been trying to, but if he succeeds in going in that direction and he ends up creating this PBC belt and doing away with the other sanctioning bodies, at least his recognition of them, that's not going to be good for boxing. That's going to make unifications with non-PBC fighters even more difficult than they already are. So, no, we don't want the PBC belt. I might have felt differently a few years ago when PBC first launched, because, again, I hadn't really thought about the UFC model deeply enough. And I hadn't really taken a step back and looked at what the UFC actually is. But now that I have, I can see that, yeah, a UFC style PBC championship would not be good for boxing. It's just a way of PBC, Al Haymon, attempting to legitimize, freezing out anybody who isn't signed with them. That's all you're talking about here. Them trying to freeze out anybody who isn't signed with them. And them trying to delegitimize fighters with different, who are with other promotional outfits or with other networks. Say, they're not real champions because they're not with PBC. Do you understand what I'm saying? Maybe there's an element of that goes on with the UFC. I don't know. But certainly with PBC, I'm sure that's what road we're going to go down now. If you ain't a PBC champion, you're not a real world champion. But it's all about politics. It's not really about who's the best. It's about politics. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Al Haymon still trying to go down this PBC champion route. Will it work? Won't it work? If you think it's good for boxing, please state your case in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you because I can't see how this will be good for boxing. UFC just is an in-house entity, right? They just have a bunch of in-house fights. Well, Al Haymon having a bunch of in-house fights, that's all he'd be doing, just slapping a PBC championship belt on it. That's it. Imagine if Eddie Hearn did the same. Okay, no more fights against people from outside of Matchroom. It's all Matchroom in-house. We'll have a Matchroom belt, and if you're not Matchroom champion, you're not a real world champion. It's literally what we're talking about here. It's not good for boxing in my view. Let me know how you feel in the comment section below. It's Haymon, I'm out.